everybody, welcome back to Plum Figgy. This is Tammy. Alright, so today we got a fun tutorial for you. This is my first time doing this. It's an embossed fabric cover for a junk journal. So I happened to be working on Halloween journals as I was putting this together. So here we go. So first off, I have this fabric here that originally started as just a plain muslin fabric that I used a watered down black acrylic paint and some distress paint, so in black soot. So that's what that is. And then here I'm showing you what my glue is going to be. If you don't have Liquitex Gel Matte Medium, a lot of people use decoupage glue, or I've seen Mod Podge has been used before too. I happen to have this, so that's what I decided to use. Okay, so as I'm showing you this, let me tell you, I had prepped my front, back, and spine covers prior to starting all of this, obviously. So the way that I got that spider on there is I have a stencil of a spider, and I used some texture paste and put that onto the stencil and then let that dry overnight, at least overnight. You really want it to be rock hard. You don't want it to be still wet at all. So now I am just putting this glue onto the cover, and I'm trying to keep it from being too wet, but also cover well enough and then get into all the nooks and crannies for the design there, because what we're going to do is we're going to put that fabric over the top of this and then glue it down, and obviously we're going to have the embossed image coming through below the fabric. So here I'm just being real careful to get a good layer and get it into the nooks and crannies and get not too wet. So I realize here I should have really put something underneath there to keep my mat from getting dirty, but I'll do that in a few minutes. But yeah, so I should mention too, this is not my idea. I've actually was inspired by a video tutorial that Zoe Tofield had put together, and I've kind of had this, like, I've been wanting to do this for the longest time, but just never could get the courage to finally do it. But then over the last few days, I found another tutorial from the Book Vandal shop, who showed her version of how she put this together based off what she watched from Zoe Tofield. So I have both of those tutorials linked down below in the description if you're interested. So yeah, definitely check out their videos, because everybody has their own way of doing things, and maybe something that they would say or do would work a little bit better for you than maybe the way that I'm doing it here. So alright, so as you can see, I'm just using my fingers to depress the fabric into all the little pieces and parts of the spider. It's funny, I happened to do this with a Halloween journal, so here I'm grabbing my Fisker's tool and thought maybe that would help get into the crevices a little bit easier. But then I realized, no, I think I want to try my Tim Holtz. It's basically the same tool, but it has a different end for, oh, what are those called? They're like the temporary tattoo type things, but for paper. I'll come up with it at some point and put it over the screen. So anyway, in the end, I felt like my fingers kind of helped get it done the best. It looks like the glue is dry, but it's really not. It's still kind of moving around at this point. So I'm just trying to be careful not to mess anything up, basically. But then I realized the straight edge of that tool could help define and create a white border, kind of. So as I was scratching away, the paint that I put onto the fabric started to reveal the uh, original fabric color, sort of like when you're distressing furniture. When you paint and then distress furniture, you're taking away that layer of paint, and so that's kind of what I was doing here with the fabric. So here you can kind of see the white edge is starting to show up as I'm just getting into the nooks and crannies. So yeah, you couldn't even really see that leg before. But yeah, so if you have a couple of tools like this, and then I even then went and found a little metal nail file that happened to have just in my tool kit there that comes in handy once in a while. I grabbed that and used that for a while. Oh, I thought I'd try and distress the edge of the front cover there just to try that and see what it would look like, and just happened to use my ruler because that's what I had, and then tried that there. So I liked how that looked, and so at this point I decided I'm going to let it sit and dry a little bit more before I mess with it anymore, and I'm going to move on now to work on the spine piece. And prep the rest of the fabric to accept the spine and the back cover. So here I'm putting my paper down to save my mat because I just didn't want to have glue all over it, just to clean it up later. So, all right, so this little next tip is something that Zoe did that I thought was really genius and helpful. So just use a ruler, and you want your spine to be 1/4 of an inch away from each of your back and front covers. But I drew a line so that I knew where my spine and back cover should sit. So that way everything's going to stay straight. And then from here, I'm going to mark off 1/4 of an inch here. So from that line is where my spine is going to start. So here I grab my spine. I'm just setting it in there because I couldn't remember how wide my spine was. But if you knew how wide yours is, you can easily do that. And then I'm marking the other side, front or top and bottom. Very carefully so that everything stays put. And then from that mark, I'm going to mark another 1/4 of an inch to where my back cover is going to start. And I guess it was easier to do it upside down. I don't know why I did that. Just checking it again. And so there was 1/4 of an inch from my other side of the spine. Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same process on my spine piece, where I'm just adding a thin layer of the gel matte medium and getting a good amount on there. I used bits of twine for that design, and then here I realized, I don't know how well you can see it, but at the bottom there was, I used some cereal box, and that was the natural fold of the cereal box, and I forgot about that. So I decided I better cover that up because that's going to show right through and you won't have the same thing on the other side. So what I ended up doing was cutting two more pieces of twine and just adding to the design there, kind of last minute. And so my marking that I just had done came in super helpful there, and was able to quickly line up the spine to the cover. And now I'm doing the exact same thing that I was doing with the cover, where I am just using my fingers, trying to get everything glued down as well as I possibly can, and trying to define those edges of all this twine pieces. And then, yeah, so kind of just going through and doing the same exact thing. And at the same time here, I'm kind of defining the spine itself. So I'm using the edge of that tool to make a white mark, a white line along the edge. So, oh, and then here I have a pair of tweezers, and I'm just using the other end of the tweezers, and have it sideways. That really helped me get the twine in a good straight line there. So, all right. So I guess I decided I was done with that, and now I'm just getting the back cover ready to go with the same process of adding the glue. And I decided to do half of this glue first, stick that down, and then flip it over, rub it in a little bit, and then finish gluing. I just didn't want the glue to dry before I was ready. I just didn't want to have to keep adding layers of glue because the glue would dry. So really, I probably should have done it this way on the front cover too, but that's okay. It all ended up well in the end. So, yep, just doing the same exact thing, smoothing it out with my fingers, and defining all of the edges as best that I can. And now, what am I doing now? Oh, I think, yep, I went back to the front cover and I decided I really liked that tweezer tool. And so I'm going back and kind of outlining that spider a little bit more, switching off between my tools, but kind of just scratching along the edges with a straight edge. So just better defining the embossed image here. So, and you can see it's really starting to appear now by scratching away some of that paint from the fabric. I know the Book Vandal shop, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now. She said that she likes to paint the cover after she does this whole process. And honestly, I didn't finish watching her tutorial. Her last video shows her doing that and then coming back later, and I think she sands it down. So that's another way that you could do it. That's not how I decided to do it this time, but I might try. Well, I'm definitely going to be doing this again with different images and things. So I might try it that way the next time, but I had already done the fabric for this, and it was ready to go. So I decided to go ahead and do it this way. So, like I said, I mean, you can kind of take this tutorial and make it work for you the best way that it can. So, all right. So now I'm just going through and basically doing the same thing with that edge of my tweezers and just defining each little detail, and I'll go around the perimeter of each element as well. Okay, so got all that done. Now I want to add some glue in between the spine and the front and back covers so that we can get rid of some of that gap. So I'm just taking my art glitter glue here and just really going to town. I know you're all screaming at me, I don't need to use that much glue, but just wait, the next one's going to be even more glue. So just fill in that gap with glue, and then I'm going to squeeze those together and hold them until they dry. I decided it would be easier to do it this way, and see, I'm glad I did, because up there it wasn't quite going together quite right. So just held that there until it dried enough, and now I'm doing the other side, adding way more glue than I need. Okay, so I got all the glue in there, and now I'm just going to do the exact same thing and squish it together. Decided I liked doing it this way better, so turning it over, squishing it together, and just going to hold that for a minute or two until it dries a little bit. And I decided as I was holding it, I might as well trim off some of this extra fabric around the outside edges. So just going to do that real quick now. Okay, and so if any of you have ever wrapped anything around a cover like this, you'll know that you need to get rid of some of your extra fabric in each corner. So I'm just coming in at an angle, making sure that there's about 1/8 of an inch of fabric from the tip of the corner, and then angling my scissors as I finish that cut. So if you haven't seen a tutorial of this, I know I've done a tutorial, but you can pause this, put it on slow motion, watch it a few times. It takes practice. I've done this a lot of times, and even still to this day, I still mess it up. So I just got lucky this time. But yep, so I'm just looking and making sure everything's good to go before I continue gluing. And I decided I needed to add some stability, so I went and found, I keep used Tyvek priority mail envelopes for this particular use. They're really fantastic for building your junk journals. They're super strong, and you don't ever see them. But I just cut it a little bit shorter in height than my book cover is, and just gonna glue this down. And I don't know if you can see, but so the composition notebook that I use there has kind of a shiny surface. So I took my pokey tool and kind of just scored a big grid, or a grid, on both of the front and back covers, just so that the glue that I put down can kind of sink down into the cardboard from the covers. So yep, just adding some stability here, and that's going to help the spine, the gluing in between the spine and the cover from coming apart. And so now we're just going to glue all around the 4 edges, and I like to trim that little piece of the spine. Otherwise you get a weird little gap. So just trim it to about 1/8 of an inch before you hit your top of your cover. And then now when you're going to glue these 2 pieces, it's going to overlap just barely the spine piece. And that's going to help it from not having a weird gap when you're opening and closing your book. So literally the same thing that I did on all the other pieces, just adding this gel matte medium and making sure I get enough into those corners so that it's going to hold real well. Definitely don't use a good brush for that. If you're going to use a brush, it's going to ruin your brush. So pick one that you don't care about. So here I'm just bending it and making sure it's laying right. I did have an issue with the back cover. It kind of was warping a little bit, so I ended up fixing that before the end process, but it's causing me a little grief through this tutorial, so you'll see me kind of messing with it a little bit. But so I always start from the top and bottom pieces first, and then now we're on the other side. So you always want to go opposite sides when you're doing this, and then you're going to start with the other sides. So I'm doing the top and bottom, and then I'll do the left and right sides after. And that'll give you really nice mitered corners. So yeah, just getting a gluey mess here with my fingers. But getting rid of some of the extra glue there that kind of came out along the edges. And I'm just going to check again to make sure that everything's sitting the way it should. And now I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to show you what I do. And I'm actually going to zoom in too, so you can see it even more up close. But I'm getting glue down in that corner there. And yep, gonna do the other side. And don't forget to glue the corner where your fabric is gonna flip over onto too. So now I'm just gonna take my fingernail and just barely pinch that little bit of fabric over before I wrap the fabric over the top of it. So hopefully you could see that, and I'll do that again over here using my other fingernail, just tucking that little piece in there, and with my fingers just making sure everything's going the way that it should be going and where they should be going. And then I'm going to smooth everything else out. But I'm mostly concerned that those corners are tucked in and glued in well. So, oh, and I guess I didn't get enough glue, so just going to add a little bit more glue here. Just make sure everything's super secure. Okay, so now we're on the other side, and I'm zooming you in, and you can see my grid where I scored that so that the glue will seep in and hold on to it better. So now you'll be able to see more easily. Sorry for my hand in the way there. I'm getting that glue down in there. You don't necessarily need to paint the fabric. I know I kind of go back and forth, but usually I don't paint the fabric. I'll paint the cover part where the fabric will flip over onto. But for whatever reason, I just decided to do it this way this time. And moving over to the other side. Super close up. But again, just making sure we're getting glue into all the crevices and the edge there. And you can't forget about the top. And here you're going to see I'm taking my fingernail and pushing that in. And then I'm going to wrap it over the top like that. I got a lot of glue coming out, but that's okay. It's going to dry clear. That's what I love about this gel matte medium. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's super good about not showing through. It's great, actually. Okay, so now going over to this other side. Sorry about my fingernails, but just using my tip of my fingernail. Still brown from the vintage photo. Stress stain. And doing the same thing there. Okay, so got all that done. Everything is pretty well ready to go for my front and back inside cover. So here you can see I'm messing with this. There's a little bit of warp. So this was still a little bit damp from the glue, I guess. So I just stuck it under a book overnight and it straightened it right out. And actually then the front cover got a little wonky. So I had to do the same thing with the front cover. So now we're ready to finish decorating and then glue in the book block. So I'm just making sure everything is equally spaced out. At this point, I don't know what else I could really do to fix that, but I don't know. That's just what I decided to do. So, all right. So for my front and back inside covers, I decided to use this black and white photo of a spooky forest, and it was just a little bit too small, so I've got some gray cardstock there, and I'm going to cut this in half and glue it onto the cardstock, which is going to make it even more sturdy, and then glue all that into my cover. So. Okay, so I got them both mounted. Now all I need to do is add a little bit of glue to the back of them and glue them in. And I'm just making sure they're the right size. And what I try to do is have the same distance on the top and bottom and right or left side of where I'm gluing, just to make everything even and look professional. So there you saw I took my finger, and I do that around the perimeter so that glue doesn't seep out along the edge. Here you just got to trust yourself and go for it. So just gonna press it down, and that'll be it for that. And now I have my book block, and this is a hollow back binding, so I didn't sew the signatures directly into the spine. They're sewn into another piece that is then glued in. And there we have it. We have a finished journal. So I think it turned out really well for my first try. Really thankful for the ladies who have done their tutorials. It was invaluable putting this together. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you want to subscribe, I would love that. You'll get notified of new videos as I put them out. All right, thanks guys.